Welcome to episode 15 of the Animorphs Read Along broadcast. Today we are talking about the Andalite Chronicles. There's so much to talk about in this book, and a lot happens in terms of plot. I'm going to try to avoid talking about plot summary and just pull out some things that I think are worth looking at and worth talking about. So this is kind of a prologue to the Animorphs series. It really gives us, I think, the context that we didn't realize we were missing for this story. This story takes place about 20 years in the past. This takes us back to the very beginning of Elfangor's military career. So Arbra and Elfangor are investigating a Skritna ship that is leaving Earth. Skritna are sort of a hilarious nod to the stereotypical idea of aliens and alien abductions in the 90s. This sort of circular flying saucer, it's a kind of short humanoid looking aliens. Turns out the Skritna have inadvertently dug up this legendary artifact called the Time Matrix, which is sort of the stuff of myth and apparently has the power to rewrite history, destroy/change the universe. In this book we see Elfangor as young Aritz. His only goal is to become that big war hero, and the first time he really gets a taste of war and the fighting, he just wants to take off the other direction. We can see that in their first big fight, Elfangor is an amazing fighter, and he kind of loses himself to the violence. It kind of was reminiscent of what we see when Rachel is fighting. And Arbran and Alaran were both kind of like, whoa. But he, instead of feeling proud, was kind of disgusted with himself, and he couldn't stop reliving it over and over again in his head. We also have this really interesting conflict between Alaran and Elfangor when Alaran wants to kill tens of thousands of Yeerks while they're just sort of in their natural state. Elfangor refuses because he thinks that's wrong, that's a war crime. Alaran is like, these are the enemy, you know, this is war. But Elfangor thinks that this is unethical. And it's really interesting to think about, considering that we, in book 6, saw Jake and the Animorphs killing thousands of Yeerks without even a second thought. It makes us question things that the Animorphs have done. You know, is this more complicated than we've been led to believe? We've heard Alaran's name before, back in book 8, so I think we know from the get-go how this is going to play out. He is going to become Visser 3. We basically find out that this is pretty much Elfangor's fault. You know, he made some foolish errors and set it up perfectly so that Alaran could get infested. And so by the end of this book, Elfangor has accumulated a bunch of what he sees as failures. He lost his friend Arbran to the Taxon. He's caused Alaran to become infested by a Yeerk, which has never happened before. By the time he and Lauren escape from the weird tri-dimensional area, Elfangor is so disillusioned with himself and with Andalites and with this war that he basically decides to go live on Earth and just be like, screw it. When the Ellimist comes in and basically tells Elfangor, no, like, this is not gonna fly, you have a destiny and this is not it, we can see not only how important Elfangor is as an individual, but how important the Animorphs are. The existence of the Animorphs was not a coincidence, and it is not inconsequential. I mean, the Ellimist is safeguarding their existence 20 years before they even go to that construction site. Perhaps the biggest reveal of all that the Andalite Chronicles gives us is that Tobias is Elfangor's son. Even though the Ellimist erased Lauren's memories of Elfangor, he let her keep the baby that they had made together. So that connection that Tobias felt back in book 1 when he met Elfangor and just like stayed with him and wouldn't walk away, now we find out why. That was because he was meeting his father. So Chapman is in this book, and I'm kind of confused about why, because I think in book 2 we see Chapman as a sympathetic figure. You know, he's become a controller for his daughter. In this book, he's straight up a villain, and he's a horrible person. He's selfish, he lies, he's power hungry. I guess I'm confused about whether or not he himself is a good person. Like, does Chapman just suck? The Taxon homeworld is an exciting section of the story. Morphing Taxons is an incredibly unpleasant experience. The hunger they feel is ever present and totally just all consuming. And so, you know, Elfangor, I think, says he can understand why Taxxons want to be controllers, because at least then they don't have to control their own bodies. This book sets up a lot of questions I think that future books will answer. We get this idea of the Elamists being a sort of vague force for good, and they have an opponent who is a force for evil. We definitely are still building up to finding out what really happened on the Hork-Bajir homeworld. We know this quantum virus thing now, but we still definitely do not have the whole story. And now we know that the Time Matrix, this super powerful weapon, is on Earth. And I think ultimately the Andalite Chronicles just is an excellent piece of world building. Those are my thoughts about the Andalite Chronicles. The next book is book number 14, The Unknown, and I will be posting about it next Monday. If you want to keep up with this read along, subscribe to this channel or follow me on Twitter.